Iran will face the consequences for its actions. We will choose our response accordingly.
Welcome to Stratnews Global. I'm Surya Gangadharan. At a time when Iran has carried out drone strikes on Israel, and apparently the matters have concluded, we keep hearing reports and reading reports about Israel planning an imminent strike on Iran. I have with me Khinvraj Jangid. He's visiting faculty at the Ben Gurion University of the Negev. This is in Tel Aviv. Jangid, glad to have you.
Thank you.
So, the million dollar question that I have, my first question for you, Jangid, will Israel strike? From what we read in the media, it appears Israel is preparing for a strike on Iran.
Uh, that's indeed the case if we look at the statements of the Israeli leaders. And I suppose Israeli leaders got to speak in that language. They are expressing, extreme amount of, provocation. And they want to, in a way, tell Iran that uh, they will really strike back. But I don't see that happening anytime soon. And the reason for that is the reservations that American administration has against such a retaliation at the moment. America has said in very clear terms that it will not join any counterattack on Iran. It did extremely well in defending and assisting Israel to shoot down the drones and the missiles. So is the case with France and United Kingdom. So if we look at the three major Western allies of Israel, they don't really want Israel to retaliate. In fact, some of the moderate leaders in Israel, now not in politics, but there is still influential people like Ehud Olmert, uh, who has said that we have humiliated enough Iran by destroying all their air power. And this is remarkably the case here, that there is a greater sense of assurance within Israel about the Iranian threat. Israelis lived with this anxiety for the last 6 months, by the way. When will Iran attack? When will Hezbollah attack? Will it become a regional war? Will they see a greater tragedy falling upon them after the October 7th? And when the Iranian attack happened on the Sunday night, it didn't really harm much. And it didn't even create national chaos with sirens. I slept well that night in Tel Aviv because there was no siren. It's only in the morning that I saw my phone and there were tons of messages about how are you, and I didn't understand. And then I opened the news and I said, oh, Iran already carried the night long shooting, and Israel took care of all of these drones and missiles in the air. So I think the leaders of Israel, and some of them are very aggressive, ultra nationalist, and hardliners, hawkish.
Yeah.
They want to say these things, but I think they just have to say these things without having resources to do the attack right now.
You said Israel has a greater sense of assurance now. Would you say they're recovered from the trauma of October 7th last year?
This is something that was really a lot written, and I saw it in the street with people, because the build up to the Iranian attack was long. As I said, for 6 months, Iranian threats were everyday concerns in Israel. Iran wasn't keeping quiet since the
Yeah.
October 7th. Hezbollah was shelling the whole of north of Israel. More than 80,000 people of the north of Israel are homeless right now because they are evacuated from that area. So, because of this kind of an Iranian war of attrition, there was a genuine worry: what will happen the day Iran will attack? And the night when Iran attacked, nothing happened.
Hmm.
It was remarkably a matter of relief. And strategically, the people who write about the Israeli defense capabilities here as well as in America, they really said, Well, this establishes Israel's deterrence abilities and the defense edge over the region. In fact, Joe Biden, the first thing that he said, I congratulate Israel for defending itself in an impeccable manner. And he indeed said, this is a great matter of satisfaction and celebration that Iran was humiliated, that Iran couldn't do anything, even when it really launched so many, rockets and drones and missiles in such a short span of night.
Jangid, they say that forewarned is forearmed. Now, there's enough of a buzz going around about how there was kind of understanding as to how this attack would happen, including a vague idea of when it would happen. And this information had been conveyed across at various levels, whether from the US and Israel or even possibly by Iran itself.
I think Iran is in a psychological uh, war with Israel. If you look at the Iranian, language of the leaders, they speak in extremely, uh, in a way, threatening manner against
Yeah,
Israel. However, Iran itself is not in a very strong position. Just before this attack, when for a week and a half after the attack on the consulate in Damascus, when Iran said we will retaliate, there was a lot of internal debate within Iranian state where the regime had to worry about its own legitimacy and the fact that it can really drag the whole country into a war with Israel. The regime itself doesn't enjoy a popular support. It enjoys power right now because it has a very strong police and very autocratic ministries to control the protesting domestic dissenters.
yeah,
But we have seen over the last 5 6 years that every year there is one or two major events against the regime. So I think
yeah,
not dragging the country into a war is also something they needed. I would say if Israel had succeeded in its war in Gaza, had Israel and its leaders not lost the trust of the American President Joe Biden in the last 6 months, had Israel not faced an extreme amount of isolation in international organizations, Iran would have not even done what it did for a night here. Let's understand, where does Israel stand after the October 7th? Israel stand after the October 7th very defeated militarily, psychologically, and politically.
yeah,
Militarily, because Hamas is not defeated. Forget the elimination of Hamas.
yeah,
Hostages are not rescued.
yeah,
Israeli army went in for 5 months. They couldn't find Yahya Sinwar, who is supposed to be in the tunnels. 2 months
yeah,
back, Israeli army reached to a tunnel and particular part of Khan Yunus, where they realized that actually there was Yahya Sinwar here, and they did a graphic how he escaped the Israeli
yeah,
army. So I think 2 months back there was this thing that okay, Israeli army is just at the tail of Yahya Sinwar, and sooner he will be captured. It didn't happen. It did in a way surprise many about Israel's military abilities, intelligence abilities, and the sheer amount of failure. So I think militarily Israel has reached nowhere.
mm,
Politically, Israeli leaders have really alienated some of its strong supporters in the world, including S. Shankar, who was in Berlin 2 months back, and he said, well, Israel should have been very mindful of the civilian casualties. And he added, the two state solution is all the more important and urgent now to address. So
yeah,
I think political alienation, because of the way Netanyahu and his cabinet approached the whole Gaza operation created a kind of a sense of alienation. I mean, Joe Biden is speaking against Netanyahu more than 5 times, where he said words, he is harming Israel's national security, he is a big mistake, Gaza war will not be won by military. So I think this kind of a situation gave a sense to Iran that it can really carry an airstrike and Israel won't be in a position to retaliate.
Tell me, is this about Netanyahu? Is he the one who is out on a limb out there trying to push for a more hardline stance? Are there others holding him back? Is this Netanyahu?
See, we'll talk about the political compunctions of Netanyahu later, but Israel is a small state. And Israeli political system is such that the foreign policy is prime minister driven foreign policy. They don't have
Okay.
political distribution of powers. Foreign minister is the most neglected office. Uh, it's only the prime minister and the defense minister who matter in the Israeli government.
Okay.
It's usually a joke in Israel. If a leader is given the foreign ministry, means he's humiliated or she's humiliated.
Hmm.
It's without any wings. So it's the prime minister who does, in a way, define Israel's foreign policy. And Netanyahu, from the day one, relied on this hardline position, not because of his other coalition partners. I think because he himself believes in a very Machiavellian, Hobbesian, hard power, realpolitik. But he over relied and he underestimated Hamas. He over relied on the Israeli military and he underestimated the ability of Hamas to cope a complete attack on Gaza. So the military operation did not succeed. I think that's a big setback for his logic. His logic would have
Mhm.
been celebrated. His logic would have really
Yeah.
got a popular vote behind him had there been capturing of Yahya Sinwar, had there been release of all the hostages.
Yeah.
So he, in a way, relied all on the military. He discarded all other advices given by America and others, which was to negotiate, make a compromise, and get your people back from Gaza on the you know in the last 6 months. And I think he didn't really take that into account that he needs a backup plan.
Mhm. Do you think the developments of this last month, with the strains evident in the US Israel relationship, is this a long term thing? Is it largely because of Netanyahu? How do you see it?
See, Israel enjoys a very unique relationship with America. They both call it unbreakable, and I do think it's unbreakable. They have terrible amount of conflicts. They go through many fundamental
Mhm.
disagreements. However, the fact that America stands behind Israel is undisputed. Now, what's the problem? The problem for long is with a democratic president and Netanyahu. Now, Netanyahu has been in power for 16 years. He
Yeah.
gave a lot of headaches to Bill Clinton in 1996 when Bill Clinton wanted to continue with the Oslo peace process. And Netanyahu came up in the Israeli politics directly talking against the idea of the Oslo peace process. So Bill Clinton couldn't really get hold of Netanyahu's unilateralism. Then you have another remarkable president in America, Barack Obama. Now, Barack Obama struggled hard to to convince Netanyahu for the two-state solution. He used all kind of pulls and punches. It didn't work. In
Mm.
fact, they both fell apart terribly on the question of Iranian nuclear program. Remember, Barack Obama signed this very famous, nuclear slowing down deal with Iran rather than confronting
Yeah.
and attacking Iran or sanctioning Iran, because Barack Obama finally made American, let's say, policymakers realize that Iran will become nuclear. Maybe not now. We can help it another 20 years, 30 years down the line.
Yeah.
Netanyahu didn't like that at all. He went against all the protocols. He sided with the Republicans. They invited him to the Senate. He addressed a joint session and he spoke against the US president, which was unprecedented. It was
Yeah.
Israeli chutzpah, the audacious Israeli chutzpah, which
Mm.
was really reported that Netanyahu just did a chutzpah in America. You don't really go behind the US president and in the US political system and work against him. But he did because he realized a great advantage in anti Americanism. See, in the last 15, 16 years, one of the strongest, let's say, points about Netanyahu's domestic politics was that he could stand up to the world for the sake of Israel. Now, whatever
Mm.
ideas he had for the Israelis, we can debate that. But the fact that he was capable of anti Americanism was actually seen by his nationalist hardliners a sign of his strength that Israel should show to America.
Mm.
And he really reaped benefits on that. He did. Obama is the least appreciated US president in Israel.
Mm.
And it's only because of the legacy of Netanyahu's policy and collaboration with Barack Obama. So Joe Biden knows all of it. When Joe Biden became the president, he knew that he was the deputy of Barack Obama and he knew what Netanyahu could do to Barack Obama.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Joe Biden didn't invite him to the White House.
Mm.
When he became the president, there was a domestic protest against Netanyahu for the sake of democracy and checks and balances, judicial reforms. And Joe Biden took a very strong stand against Netanyahu. It went on, by the way. Joe Biden wanted to say, I'm not going to give any concession and I will not encourage Netanyahu's unilateralism. When October 7th happened, Joe Biden came to Israel on 10th of October. It was a very strong gesture. And this time, because the way Joe Biden took care of the Israeli sentiment, he
Mm.
really attended to the trauma and the anxieties of the Israeli state and the people, that Netanyahu couldn't do anti-Americanism
Mm.
against him. He
Him.
tried, by the
Mm.
way. He tried and he said, we are not a, when the Rafah, remember, for the whole of
Yeah.
March, there was
Mm.
this Israeli obsession to invade a southern part of Gaza called Rafah. It's a
Yeah.
crossing. And Joe Biden and Americans put a full stop that you cannot invade Rafah or do a massive military operation, and we will not support it. He said this, and many of his cabinet ministers said it. We will do what we can do. We are not a banana republic.
Yeah. Mm.
They had to
Very
swallow
interesting.
the pill. They had to behave like a highly dependent, they are not equal in the relationship. And I think now we know that Rafah is out of all options that Israel can have. And it's
So that's not
pertinent.
happening. Rafah is not happening.
No, it's not happening. I'll tell you the more embarrassing joke right now. So when just before this Iranian attack, uh, because Netanyahu didn't have any kind of a political maneuvering out of this fiasco with Joe Biden and Rafah. Two of his cabinet ministers spoke about Rafah as an essential part of the Israeli military operation, that Israel cannot withdraw from Gaza without going to Rafah.
Yeah.
Netanyahu came on a press conference addressing the nation and he said, let me assure you, we will go to Rafah and we have a date. Just
Mm.
next day, Americans got very
Yeah.
alerted and asked the defense minister, who they trust more, by the way. Gallant has been
Mm.
invited to Washington number of times.
Yeah.
And they asked the defense minister, "Do you have a date?" And defense minister said, "We don't have a date."
Mm.
Which is to say that the Americans are working more with the defense minister than the
Yeah.
prime minister of Israel. So I think
Okay, we come to
Netanyahu has really
yeah.
got into a bad spot.
Mhm. But you can't write him off.
It's a kind of a complexity of the Israeli politics. It's true, and it's really unbelievable in the Israeli, civil society and the media. Everybody really wants to get away from him and take Israel beyond him. They just don't know
Yeah.
how,
Yeah.
because his coalition is extremely intact.
Mhm.
Now, this government has 4 years of a mandate. None of the coalition partners are going to walk out because of the
Yeah.
American pressures or because of the domestic pressure, because all of them are more hardliners than Netanyahu. So they realize that they wouldn't come back to power whenever the elections will happen. So even if their agendas are falling apart, they are not
Mhm.
letting the coalition collapse. So it's really a very tricky situation in Israel. The
Mhm.
only way, and I'll give you a very good example of something more drastic, bombshell kind of a thing happened in Israel on Saturday. In fact, Thursday night it happened, and Friday, Saturday went in the anticipation of the Iranian attack. Thursday evening, a very credible television channel did a documentary kind of a program where they talked about the Mossad, Shin Bet, and army people about what kind of a strategy has been working with regard to the hostages and Gaza.
Yeah. Huh.
Two of the people who are currently in negotiation on behalf of Netanyahu's cabinet, they spoke anonymously and they said, "We could have got the hostages back 2 months back had it not been Netanyahu."
Mm.
They directly accused Netanyahu to not give priority to the hostage deal.
Mhm.
Another person who is the ex head of Shin Bet and Mossad, he served under Netanyahu for 5 years. He came on the national television and he said, "We would not get any hostages back. We would not get out of the trouble in Gaza militarily. We will hardly recover from the trauma of October 7th unless and until we change the government." He gave a call to the people that this is it. It's all over if people don't come out on the street.
Mhm.
So what happened on Saturday? The Saturday night the attack happened
Yeah.
by 1. But Saturday evening at 7 o'clock in Tel Aviv, in Jerusalem, more than 1 lakh people assembled because there was this very extreme realization among the people that if the security establishment and the Sinbad and Mossad and Dif army are not in trust with the government,
With the government. Yeah.
then they are in a fix.
Yeah.
So I think Israelis over this weekend, the last weekend, Israelis went through two really drastic events: the realizations about Netanyahu and his strategy, and the deep distrust that the security establishment is having with the government, and the Iranian attack.
Mhm. So, last question, Jangid. Do you believe Iran has lost face with its proxies internationally after the manner in which it went about with these attacks and the fact that nothing ever struck really?
I personally think strategy wise, Iran made a blunder. Let's look at two things. If it was to weaken Israel, then Israel didn't actually lose much.
Yeah, yeah.
In fact, it strengthened Israel by ending its isolation. Remember, often people accuse Israel of exaggerating its existential anxieties.
Yeah.
That the world is not attacking Iran, Israel. Iran is not an aggressive state as Israelis have portrayed it to be. But look, Iranian attack really came out in a very, very delicate time. So I think it, in a way, helped Israel come out of the position of an aggressor and an extreme retaliatory force that the world could, see it in Gaza. Second,
Mhm.
because of Netanyahu's domestic politics or the strategy in Gaza, a lot of the Western allies and the Arab states became very critical of him.
Yeah.
In Iran attack, they all came together.
Yeah.
So now we
Yeah.
know officially. Now we officially know that Saudi Arabia did help.
Yeah.
Jordan actively shot down the drones and the missiles, and UK,
Yeah.
France, and America came out with full force. It strengthened Israel
Yeah.
regionally with the so-called opponents of Iran, and it in a way re-established some of Israel's existential worries that the world really takes them with more trust than cynicism.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Very interesting. Very interesting. Jangid, we are completely out of time, but this perspective has been great and great talking to you.
Thank you very much, Surya.
Let's hope
Thank you.
I'm sure we'll catch up again. The That region you're in is volatile, and we'll probably have another chat on this course sometime later. Thanks very much again.
Thank you, Surya. Thank you for this talking.